Bach's objection to the claim that intention is the mark that distinguishes your actions. You see, here's our question. What is the mark that distinguishes your actions from things that merely happen to you? Davidson's view, the standard story, is that the mark is intention. Those events which are guided by your intentions in some way are actions. Other events are things that merely happen to you. Frankfurt attempts to undermine this view, to oppose it, by offering what I'm calling the argument from spiders. But what we've seen is that there are some reasons to doubt that the argument from spiders can be made to work. So what we have then are some options. And what I want to do here is to try a different line, to take an argument not from Frankfurt but from another philosopher called Bach, and see whether this argument will allow us to conclude that Davidson's view, the standard story, is wrong. Some actions, says Bach, are performed too routinely or automatically or unthinkingly to be in any way intentional. This is his key claim. He gives some examples. He says, there need be nothing intentional about scratching an itch. There need be nothing intentional about ducking under a flying object. Sorry, you didn't appreciate that, did you? No, I'm not really funny, am I? You know, the other day I was at a farm, actually. I was walking past a farm, there was a big notice and it said duck eggs. And I stood there thinking, why have they put a comma in that notice? And then it hit me. It hit me. Yep, you've got it. There need be nothing intentional, says Bach, about ducking under a flying object. Impulsive actions also, says Bach, are not intentional. I just impulsively told you a joke. I shouldn't have done that in the middle of a lecture. Serious business, this. So here's Bach's argument, or at least the words that he uses to construct the argument. What I'd like you to do is to use these quotations from Bach to construct an objection to what I'm calling the standard story, or Davidson's view. The view that intention is the mark that distinguishes your actions, along the lines of Frankfurt's argument from spiders. So what you're looking for here is an argument, 1, 2, 3, conclusion 4, whatever, that opposes the view that intention is the mark that distinguishes your actions. With your lecture buddy, 90 seconds, go. So I wonder where you've got to with reconstructing this as an argument against the view that intention is the mark that distinguishes your action. Here's my attempt. Ducking under a flying object is an action. When you duck under a flying object, there is no intention you are acting on. Therefore, intention is not the mark that distinguishes actions. Now, I love this argument for its simplicity. It seems very clear that if the two premises are accepted, we just have to reject the standard story, Davidson's view. So there's no doubt that the argument's valid. That's to say that there's no possible situation where we've got true premises and a false conclusion. But is the argument sound? Does the argument have true premises? Now, the first premise here, I think it's unclear whether or not we should accept this. Are some cases of ducking actions and some not? Or are all cases of duckings actions? Perhaps there are cases where one actually ducks, but there is no action involved at all. That seems to be a possibility. But that by itself shouldn't undermine the argument, because it seems that we only need some cases of ducking to be actions. But now take a look at the second premise. When you duck under a flying object, there's no intention that you're acting on. Now, I think that is clearly false if we take it to mean that there's never an intention you're acting on. In this case, the flying object is fists. Charlie here, doing very well, clearly is acting on an intention. There's no question about that at all. So I think really what I've done here, to be fair, I've made a mistake in reconstructing this argument. And you can see that because if you go back and take a look at what Bach wrote, he's not saying that whenever you duck under a flying object, there is never an intention. Right? He's perfectly happy with the idea that Charlie here is intentionally ducking under a flying object. On the contrary, all Bach is claiming is that there are cases where you duck, what you're doing is an action, but there's no intention involved at all. That's what Bach is claiming. So the real trick here, the real objection isn't to say, there are cases where you're ducking and there's an intention. That's not an objection to Bach at all. That's an artifact of my poor reconstruction. If we improve it, what you can see here is that the real pressure point is this. Is Bach right that there are cases where the ducking is both an action, premise 1, and also something done with an intention, premise 2? And that's the thing which isn't obvious. And you can see it isn't obviously true because there are philosophers who just reject that claim. Bratman, in a famous footnote to a paper called Two Faces of Intention, says, "It is unclear whether we can appeal to a general intention to protect myself from flying objects." And here he's actually defending the view that there may well be an intention in all cases in which one ducks, or he talks about catching a flying object, ducks or catches a flying object. He thinks there may very well be a general intention to protect yourself from flying objects. So if Bratman is right, Bach's argument will fail. So we've now taken a look at a second attempt to show that the standard view is wrong. And we've seen that the argument, at least as we've reconstructed it from Bach, does not seem fully convincing. We haven't shown that it's wrong, we haven't defended Davidson's view. What I've suggested to you is just that we don't yet have a satisfying objection to Davidson's view, one that should completely convince us that we reject the view that the mark which distinguishes your actions is intention.